What happens when the one who rebuilt you vanishes without warning? It started subtly, a shift too small for anyone to notice at first. One Friday morning before dawn, ghost hour unfolded like always. The benches laid out, rifles stripped, Eden correcting a grip with a single touch, Rock guiding the younger recruits through trigger resets, Leo tightening a scope mount without a word. The silence moved with them like breath, steady and certain. But at the edge of the field, a figure watched, alone, no driver, no entourage, no ceremony, General Keene. He stood there for nearly an hour, unmoving, hands behind his back, eyes locked on the way the group moved together. He saw Eden pause beside a recruit fumbling with a bolt carrier, her hand correcting his angle once, then leaving him to learn. He saw Rock lean closer to a candidate, whispering words sharp but measured. He saw Leo glance over shoulders, spotting flaws before they broke. Keene's chest tightened. He had seen elite training before. He had seen the machine of the Navy grind men down and rebuild them into something stronger. But this was different. This was slower, quieter, more human. When the session ended, he stepped forward. Soldiers froze when they noticed him. Unsure whether to salute or vanish, Eden didn't move. She wiped her hands on a rag, as if the presence of a four-star general was just another shift in the wind. "You rebuilt them," Keene said finally, his voice low, not command, not praise, just truth. Eden met his eyes. They rebuilt themselves. He studied her, the lines carved into her face, the silence pressed into her stance. "Come back," he said softly, "not to the roster, to the mission." Her gaze didn't waver. "I never left." The answer struck him harder than any refusal. He held her eyes for a long moment, then nodded once, nothing more. And when he walked away, no one followed him, not even protocol dared intrude on what had just passed. The change came days later, subtle, sharp. One morning, Eden didn't unlock the armory at 4:30. At first, Rock thought he was early. He stood waiting in the cool dark, listening for her boots on the gravel. By 4:45. The doors opened, but not by her hand. They were already unlocked. Inside, the benches were set, rifles stripped, tools arranged with surgical precision, but Eden wasn't there, neither was her rifle. Rock said nothing. He simply picked up the first weapon and began. 10 minutes later, Leo joined him. Then the younger recruits. They trained in silence, the way she had taught them, but her absence was louder than any command. Day 2, still no Eden. Day 3, whispers began. "She's gone." Command pulled her. She was never here. Day 4, something new. On her bench, neatly folded under a canvas top, lay a small olive-green duffel. Rock was the first to see it. His hands trembled as he lifted the strap. Inside, her tools. A bolt carrier she had rebuilt 17 times. A sidearm, no longer regulation but spotless. And at the bottom, a photo. 7 figures, blurred, dusty, no names, just shapes in the haze of another lifetime. One woman in the center, half-turned, almost unrecognizable, but unmistakably her. Behind the photo, taped flat, an Overwatch coin. Leo held it like a relic, his jaw tight. "She's not coming back," he said quietly. Rock didn't answer. He couldn't. His hands clutched the canvas strap, chest locked with something heavier than grief. Not abandonment, not betrayal, something else. Legacy. She hadn't left them empty. She had just stepped back into the shadows. Weeks passed, the sun still rose with military precision, reveille still sounded, formations still stood, but the rhythm had changed, not from command, not from rank, from the bench she had left behind. Rock never missed a morning. At 4:30 sharp, he opened the armory, laid out rifles, waited. Sometimes Leo joined him. Sometimes the recruits, sometimes it was just him, alone in the silence, but the method never changed. No shouting, no shortcuts, no dishonor. They called it ghost hour still, but now it wasn't hers alone, it belonged to all of them. And Rock understood what Aaron had meant all those years ago. Do it right. What happens when someone is gone, but their silence still shapes every breath you take? Weeks had passed since Eden Wolf disappeared. She hadn't said goodbye. She hadn't explained. One morning she was there, sleeves rolled, cloth in hand, cleaning a rifle like it was ritual. The next she wasn't. But the bench remained, and so did her way. Every day at 4:30, Rock opened the armory doors. He laid out rifles, tools, and steel stripped bare. He waited. Sometimes it was just him, sometimes Leo. Other mornings, half a dozen recruits drifted in, eyes sharper than their uniforms suggested, curious about the woman they'd only heard whispers of. Ghost Hour wasn't on any schedule. No officer signed off on it. No one marked attendance. And yet, it became the most disciplined hour of the day. Rifles rebuilt smoother than before. Trigger resets sharper, breath steadier, not because someone yelled at them, but because someone once taught them without words. Rock changed the most. He no longer strutted through the mess hall with jokes curled sharp at the edges. He no longer looked for weakness to exploit. Instead, he watched. He corrected quietly. He moved slower, sharper, and when recruits asked why, he didn't give long speeches. He just said, "Because that's the way she showed us." They understood, not all at once, but piece by piece. Discipline born not from fear, but from reverence, respect that wasn't demanded but earned. One afternoon, a new batch of trainees arrived. Among them, a young corporal, sharp eyes, too young to be in the SEAL candidate program. Or so it seemed. She lingered at the edge of the armory while Ghost Hour unfolded, watching without speaking. When Rock asked why she stayed, she pointed to the Overwatch coin nailed into the side of Eden's bench. Her voice was quiet. "My brother had one of those, said it belonged to someone who saved his whole unit once." Rock's chest tightened. He nodded. "Then you're already in the right place." The recruits came and went. Some stayed, some faded, but Ghost Hour remained. Not a class, not a drill, a presence. The silence Eden had left behind became something more. A language only those who showed up could understand. And yet Rock couldn't let it end there. Not just silence, not just whispers. Something inside him needed to mark her place. One evening, when the sun had dropped low and the compound was quiet, Rock walked alone to the far edge of the grounds, past the fields, past the barracks, to the old stone wall where soldiers pinned unit patches and small tributes, names written in black marker, tokens left for ghosts. He reached into his pocket, unwrapped a piece of cloth. Inside was her name tag, the only one he'd found among her things. He placed it gently against the wall, fixed it in place with the same bolt she used to carry in her gear bag. No ceremony, no speech, just 2 words written beneath in black marker. "Still watching." He stepped back. The wind carried dust across the stones. For the first time in years, Rock felt something ease inside his chest. Not closure, not healing, but truth. Eden Wolf hadn't vanished. She had become something else. A presence in the way rifles were handled with reverence. A memory in the way recruits learned to build before they fired. A silence that spoke louder than any medal, any rank, any parade. Her name would never be etched in marble. No folded flag would mark her place. No national headline would announce her sacrifice. But at Fort, there was one rule during Ghost Hour. No shortcuts. No questions. And never dishonor the bench. Because Eden Wolf hadn't asked to be remembered. She had only made sure no one else was forgotten. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.
Why was she even there, crouched in the corner of the armory, when no one seemed to want her? No one asked her name that morning. No one greeted her. She was just the woman in a faded jacket, sleeves rolled to her elbows, crouched low beside steel bench, cleaning rifles with the kind of care most men save for their firstborn. The clang of steel carried through the open bay, drowning under the rhythm of shouted drills and boots on gravel outside. To the others, she was invisible. To Eden Wolf, that was fine. She didn't come here to be seen. The M4's upper receiver gleamed faintly under the harsh fluorescent light. Her fingers worked with a precision too sharp for guesswork. too fluid for hesitation. Every pin checked, every bolt realigned. She wasn't reading from a manual. Didn't even glance at the laminated checklists tacked up on the wall. She had done this 1,000 times. In places that smelled of blood and dust instead of oil and solvent, her hands remembered what her voice never said. Someone called out from across the bay. "Tank tops aren't regulations, sweetheart. Cover that up. You're making the real soldiers nervous." Laughter followed. Short, sharp, cruel in the way it always is when people are certain no one will fight back. Eden didn't move. She didn't glare or flinch. She just kept turning the scope ring, tightening it with slow, deliberate pressure until the faint click of alignment settled the steel. Her jaw was still, her eyes calm. She had learned a long time ago that silence was sharper than any retort. But then it happened. A shift of her shoulders. The faded jacket slid lower, and the ink came into view. At first, it was just a curve of black lines against muscle. Then the full emblem revealed itself in the harsh light. A skull beneath a trident and anchor, etched with the kind of precision only someone who had earned it would ever dare to wear. The insignia, SEAL Team 6. Beneath it, 3 names, carved into her skin forever. The laughter died. The room went quiet in a way no command could enforce, because no one just wears that. Not here, not anywhere, and certainly not a woman. A private's boots slipped against the table leg as he stared wide-eyed. His buddy dropped the cleaning rod from his hand. A corporal swallowed hard and looked away as if he'd seen something sacred he wasn't meant to. The silence spread in ripples, reaching even the far edge of the bay, where instructors leaned on the rail. They too went still. Eden kept cleaning. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the sudden weight of eyes. But she felt it, the heat of curiosity, suspicion, disbelief. She had lived with that weight before. From the catwalk above, a set of boots echoed. Not the scuffed leather of enlisted men, not the clipped pace of junior officers. These boots were polished, heavy, deliberate. A man descended the steps one at a time. His posture too precise to belong to anyone but command. General Marcus King. 4 stars on his chest. 3 combat tours etched into the steel of his stance. A man who didn't rattle, didn't pause for anything that wasn't written into the chain of command. And yet, halfway down the steps, he froze. His eyes weren't on her face, not on her hands. They were locked on the tattoo. His breath caught like someone had pressed a knife to his throat. The soldiers below shifted uncomfortably. What was the general doing here? Why was he staring at a contractor as though he'd seen a ghost? Eden finally set the M4 aside, wiped her hands on a rag, reached for a torque wrench without looking at him. Her left arm flexed, bearing the ink fully now. Skull, anchor, trident. Beneath, the 3 names, Marcus Chan, Jacob Reyes, Aaron Cross. Names only known to the kind of men who buried stories deeper than Arlington's graves. General Keen's hand rose slowly toward the brim of his cap. The gesture wasn't command. It wasn't protocol. It was something older, heavier. The salute of a soldier who owed a debt. The man who had mocked her earlier broke the silence, his voice stumbling over a laugh. What is this? A joke? But even his tone cracked, because no one was laughing now. Eden stood then. Finally, straight-backed, calm, her braid fell against her shoulder. Her eyes lifting to meet Keen's with the steadiness of someone who had already buried too much to fear anything left alive. Cold as steel, she said softly, tilting her head toward the tattoo. Those names, one of them died saving you. The general didn't blink, didn't breathe, but his salute held. The rest of the bay was silent, every man frozen between disbelief and reverence. Eden let the moment pass. She didn't explain, didn't justify. She just turned back to her tools, as though the ghosts inked into her skin were explanation enough. But they weren't, not yet. The whispers began that night. In the chow hall, in the barracks, even in the corners of the officers' mess. Who was she? How could a woman, a contractor, of all things, wear that insignia. SEAL Team 6 wasn't a patch you bought. It wasn't a tattoo you dared ink on a whim. You earned it with blood, with silence, with shadows no one admitted existed. And if she had it, then what did that mean about everything they thought they knew? The soldiers avoided her eyes in the morning, but they watched her when she walked past. Quiet now, careful. The jokes faded. Even Sergeant Travis Rock, the one who had mocked her loudest, grew sharper, less certain. He didn't back down. Not yet. But something about the weight of her silence unsettled him. Eden didn't notice. Or maybe she did and refused to care. She parked her old truck in the farthest lot, walked the gravel stretch to the armory with a case in one hand, silence in the other, unlocked the benches before sunrise, laid out rifles in neat lines, and waited for the day to bleed by. She wasn't there to belong. She wasn't there to prove anything. But ghosts don't get to choose when the living finally sees them. That night, in the dim light of his quarters, General Keene pulled a file from a locked drawer, a redacted sheet, a blurred photograph from Helmand Province years ago. A woman in the dust, knife in one hand, sidearm in the other, dragging a wounded soldier through gunfire. He remembered that night, remembered the voice that had cut through the chaos, calm and steady, as if death itself were just another obstacle. It whispered her name, Chief Wolf, Eden Wolf, Ghost 7, and for the first time in 15 years, he realized the past hadn't stayed buried. Eden Wolf had walked back into daylight, and nothing on that base would ever be the same again. How far could someone be pushed before they broke? The instructors at Coronado had asked themselves that when Eden Wolf first showed up at 23 years old. Most didn't think she would last a week, not because she wasn't strong enough. She was, not because she wasn't smart enough. She was sharper than most men twice her age. It was because she didn't flinch, and men who don't flinch are one thing, but women who don't. That unsettles command in a way no handbook ever accounts for. She carried her rucksack like it was empty, ran the obstacle courses until her body bled, and when the cold water of Hell Week swallowed the rest, she simply looked out at the horizon, as though daring it to do worse, and the instructors did try. They dropped her in the crucible, a 72-hour survival gauntlet with no food. No maps, no backup, just objectives scattered across frozen terrain. By the second night, search teams nearly pulled her out. The temperature had dropped below zero. Frostbite had eaten its way across her fingers. She should have tapped out. She didn't. When they finally found her at dawn, she was crouched over a tin can stove she'd fashioned out of scrap, cooking a rat over a flame. She looked up once, nodded, and said, "Wasn't the worst vacation I've had?" That was when the whispers began. No one admitted it, but they started keeping a separate file. Not official, just notes in margins, evaluations no one wanted on the record. She was dangerous, not because she failed, but because she didn't. She passed every test, but she didn't graduate with a class. She didn't walk across the stage. She wasn't pinned. Instead, she was siphoned away, added to a shadow roster, a name on a page no one would admit existed. From then on, she wasn't training with recruits. She was being tested against real scenarios, unofficial, unrecorded. One of those tests sent her to the Syrian border, embedded with a contractor unit rumored to be under siege. She went in alone, a set phone, a sidearm, and a backpack. 5 days later, she came out with 17 civilians alive. No medals, no recognition. Just another line buried in a file stamped eyes only. Eden was learning that the less she was seen, the more she was used. By her 5th year, she wasn't just a shadow anymore. She was a ghost. Ghost 7. They weren't a normal unit. They weren't even supposed to exist. 7 operators, each with no record, no flag, no official ties. They went where wars were too costly, where silence was the only option, and if they died, no one would ever claim them. There were rules, no names in the Field, no photos, no promises of home. They lived in the kind of silence that eats most people alive. For Eden, it was a silence she carried well, until the last mission, Operation Ember Lens. The orders had been clear. Infiltrate. Intercept a rogue CIA asset selling classified arms to a hostile militia near the Pakistan-Afghan border. Retrieve the data. Package, get out. It wasn't meant to be a bloodbath. But someone, somewhere, made a call. The evac point was changed. The intel was wrong. And Ghost Team Delta walked into a kill box. Eden never talks about the first 20 minutes. 3 gone in the opening salvo. Marcus Chun took shrapnel to the lungs. Jacob Reyes cut down covering the east approach. And Aaron Cross. Aaron was the one who pulled her out of a sniper's sights. He shoved her clear and took the round. Meant for her throat, she never forgot the sound, the thud, the way his body folded before hers. For 47 minutes, she fought. Not with the arsenal she should have had. She fought with a knife, a sidearm, her own bare hands when it came. To that, 14 men dead before the evac team even touched down. She carried Aaron's body for over a mile before they forced her to let go. She returned stateside with their blood still on her skin. Command tried to pin her with medals. The Silver Star, the Distinguished Service Cross, she refused. Medals are for graves, she told them. The living carry the weight. 6 days later, her resignation was processed. The file sealed, the mission buried. The unit erased from existence. All that remained were the names: Marcus Chun, Jacob Reyes. Aaron Cross etched into her arm, burned into her silence, and for 5 years. No one spoke of her again until now. The soldiers at Fort Tannisville didn't know this. They only saw the ink and whispered. They only felt the shift in the air when she walked past, silent and unshaken, a presence they couldn't name but couldn't ignore. Sergeant Travis Rock felt it most. He had mocked her, sure, called her a fraud, a charity case. But the day he saw her dismantle an old SR-25 with nothing but her eyes, he started to wonder. She hadn't opened the rifle, hadn't even cleared it, yet she listed every fault, every fracture, every way the weapon was dying. She had seen it like other people see faces. Lucky guesses, he told himself. But deep down, he knew better. And when he saw the tattoo, his blood ran cold. He couldn't explain why not yet, but the unease lingered, scratching at him like a truth he didn't want to face. Eden, as always, said nothing. She kept her head down, cleaned rifles, waited for the day to pass, but something was shifting, and even she could feel it, because ghosts don't stay hidden forever, and the living never stop asking questions. What happens when a secret is forced into daylight? Eden Wolf had lived 5 years in shadows, but shadows don't hold when a man like Travis Rock decides to drag you into the open. The sergeant didn't let it go. He couldn't. His pride had already taken a hit the day she humiliated him with nothing but her eyes and a broken rifle. He had planned the inspection carefully, planting 3 faulty carbines among the racks. Tiny errors, subtle traps, enough to trip up any fraud pretending to know more than she did, enough to embarrass her in front of the inspection team. When the day came, Eden walked into the bay with her usual quiet stride, jacket tied at her waist, tank top already clinging. With heat, her expression unreadable. She hadn't been on the roster. She hadn't volunteered. Rock had made sure she was placed there. "Contractor Wolf," he said, voice loud enough to echo across the armory. "You're on point today." She paused, met his eyes once. "I wasn't listed. You are now." No smirk this time, just the weight of his challenge. Half the barracks had gathered. Some were eager for a show, others simply curious. Few believed she would last. Eden didn't argue. She stepped forward to the first rifle. No manuals, no hesitation. Just her eyes, her hands she lifted, inspected, touched the steel like it was alive, then set it down with quiet precision. "The locking lug's wrong," she said softly. This bolt carrier isn't from the same lot. It'll fracture under repeated recoil. An inspector frowned, checked paperwork, nodded. Rock's jaw tightened. Second weapon. She barely looked before speaking. Buffer assembly's mismatched. Won't show now, but give it 3 mags. It'll fail. The room grew quieter, laughter gone. Even the younger soldiers leaned in, caught between doubt and awe. Then the third rifle, Rock's trap. He had reversed the trigger group, a subtle sabotage almost invisible. She picked it up, held it steady, and said, "Trigger group's been built backward. It'll fire, but fail under stress." An audible ripple went through the room. She set the rifle down as if it were a child, then turned to leave. But in that moment, as she leaned forward, the tank top shifted. The jacket had long since slipped lower, tied loose at her waist. Sweat ran down the curve of her shoulder, and there it was. Not a glimpse this time. Not a half-hidden line, the full tattoo, the skull, the trident, the anchor, and beneath it, 3 names burned into flesh. Silence fell so heavy it smothered the air. A corporal froze, eyes locked. Another pulled out his phone, not to film, but to capture a still. No caption, just the image. He uploaded it to the unit's secure channel. Within 7 minutes, it had circled the base. Within 10, it had reached a man who hadn't seen that ink in over a decade. General Marcus Keene. He stopped mid-step in a corridor, his secured tablet glowing in his hand. The image froze him like a bullet had passed clean through his chest. The ink, the scar tissue surrounding it, the exact curve of her shoulder. He knew it. He had seen it once before in Helmand Province. Years ago, when Ghost 7 dragged his men out of an ambush they shouldn't have survived. His knuckles whitened around the tablet. "Divert my route," he ordered into his earpiece. "Reroute my staff. I want eyes on the Fort Tannisville Armory in 20. Discreetly." Back in the inspection bay, Eden was already wiping her hands on a rag. She hadn't noticed the shift, or maybe she had, and simply didn't care. The soldiers whispered in corners now, some with fear, some with reverence, none with laughter. Rock felt it too. The air had changed, and not in his favor. He clenched his jaw, searching for words, but found none. She had passed his test. Worse than that, she had dismantled it without breaking stride. And now the whole base was staring at her like she was something none of them understood. That night, Rock couldn't sleep. He pulled up the secure archives. Digging into records he wasn't cleared to see. He found a photo from a declassified op, dust-filled, blurry, but the figure at the center, knife in one hand, sidearm in the other, looked eerily familiar. He zoomed in. The left arm bore a trident, just like hers. His pulse ticked higher. The whispers spread faster than orders. Soldiers stopped mocking her, stopped testing her. Some began snapping to attention when she walked past. As if instinct demanded it, she noticed none of it, or pretended not to. But Rock noticed, and it burned him. He wasn't finished. He couldn't be. One morning, he cornered her near the loading bay, his voice low, sharp. "That tattoo of yours, SEAL Team 6, right? Looks damn authentic. Maybe a little too authentic. You know impersonating special warfare is a federal offense." She slid the bolt forward on an M4. Her voice was calm. "Then what?" Rock froze. The first words she'd spoken to him in weeks. And they landed like steel. He leaned closer. "Even if you did serve, if you're wearing names you didn't earn." Eden's eyes lifted. Grief flickered in them, not anger. "They're not mine to prove," she said quietly. "They're mine to remember." It struck him harder than any insult could. He stepped back without realizing why. Eden returned too. Her bench, silent again. But the air around her had shifted. From the shadows, another man had been watching. Leo Delgado, quiet, unremarkable to most. He walked forward, sleeves rolled, and without a word, he pulled his fabric higher, revealing his own ink, the trident, the skull. A mark nearly identical to hers. Faded with time, but undeniable. I was Cross's swim buddy, he said evenly, his voice carrying across the bay. Bud S. Class 249. He told me if anything happened, someone would carry the weight. He said it would be her. The room froze. Rox stared at the tattoo, then at Eden. She didn't look up, but her hands stilled for just a second. A pause. Enough to feel the weight of someone stepping forward. Leo's words landed heavy. She didn't ask for backup, but some ghosts don't walk alone. The laughter that once haunted the armory never returned. From that day on, the silence around Eden wasn't scorn. It was respect. Careful, uneasy, reverent, and in that silence, General Keene was already on his way. Because when ghosts step into daylight, the living must decide whether to salute or to run. What does it mean when a general stops the world to salute a ghost? The parade grounds of Fort Tannisville had seen their share of inspections. Rows of soldiers standing in formation, rifles shouldered, sweat running neat lines down their necks. Beneath the punishing sun, precision mattered here. Discipline mattered. Every crease, every bead of sweat was a testament to order. But nothing in the manuals prepared them for what stepped out of the black SUV that morning. General Marcus Keene. 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders. Dress greens pressed sharp. Medals glinting like fragments of wars most of these men would never know. His posture was crisp despite the years carved into his knees. His face unreadable, calm, the way storms look before the first crack of thunder. The base commander hurried. Forward, sir. Podium is this way. But Keene brushed past him. His eyes weren't on the reviewing stand. They weren't on the rows of soldiers lined like stone. His gaze cut across the field until it landed on her. Eden Wolf, not in uniform, not in formation, standing just outside the line near the weapons staging area. Tank top, boots, a jacket tied around her waist, and on her arm, visible in the harsh morning light, the ink, the insignia no one dared to wear. Keene moved before protocol could catch him. He cut through the formation like wind through tall grass. Soldiers shifted, unsure, as the most powerful man on base ignored ceremony, ignored rank, ignored every unspoken rule of the parade ground. Eden didn't move, didn't salute, didn't flinch. Her hands rested loose at her sides, but her eyes followed him with quiet steadiness. The colonel stammered behind him. General, sir, do you need a microphone? Should we? No answer. Keene stopped 10 paces from her. The sun burned overhead. Dozens of soldiers held their breath. The silence stretched until even the wind seemed to die. Then the general straightened, brought his hand sharp to his brow, and held a perfect salute. Not the perfunctory gesture of protocol, not the hollow mimicry of formality. This was something else, something older. He saluted her not as a contractor, not as a woman, not as an anomaly, but as a soldier, as one of his own. The formation rippled. A corporal gasped. A sergeant's jaw went slack. Men who had mocked her, doubted her, now stared as if witnessing the undoing of their own history. Eden blinked once. Her expression stayed still. She didn't return the salute. She didn't need to. Her silence said more than any gesture ever could. Keene lowered his hand, but his voice carried without a microphone. Every word fell with the weight of command and confession. Chief Petty Officer Eden Wolf. Go 7. First of her kind, last of her team. Sole survivor of Operation Amber Lens. The words detonated like ordnance. The line faltered. Soldiers shifted, whispering. Some froze in disbelief. A young SEAL candidate nearly dropped his rifle. Ghosts weren't real. Ghosts were rumors whispered in bars and outposts, legends told when the lights were low. And now one stood in front of them. Keene's gaze stayed, locked on her. She's the reason I'm standing here. 15 years ago, my recon team was pinned in Kandahar. No backup, no way out. Then a ghost stepped through the dust. Neutralized 3 hostiles before we could blink. Dragged one of ours bleeding from the chest half a kilometer through mortifier, and then disappeared before we could thank her. He turned to the formation. I've waited 15 years for the chance to salute her. Today, I finally got it. A hush fell so deep, even the cicadas seemed to stop. Soldiers looked at her differently. Now, not as the quiet woman in the corner of the armory, not as the butt of Rock's jokes, but as something that had lived in their stories and suddenly walked into daylight. Eden reached for her tank top then, tugged the fabric higher up her shoulder. The ink shone in full. Skull, trident, anchor, and beneath them, 3 names etched like scars. Marcus Chun, Jacob Reyes, Aaron Cross. Beneath the names, smaller letters. Never forgotten. A rustle swept through the ranks. Pride collapsing into shame. Doubt shifting into reverence. The weight of her silence pressing harder than any shouted order could. From the edge of the staging area, Sergeant Rock couldn't breathe. His eyes locked on the tattoo. But more than that, on the name burned into her skin, Aaron Cross. Cross wasn't just a name to him. Not just another SEAL whispered about. In close circles, Aaron Cross was family. His cousin, the older boy who had taught him to climb trees, tie knots, shoot straight. The one who had covered for him when their father's rage was too heavy. The one who told him, one day you'll serve too, but you better do it right. And now Rock knew the truth command had never given him. Aaron had died on that mission, died in silence, died saving the woman he had mocked, ridiculed, tried to humiliate. His chest tightened with something that wasn't shame anymore. It was grief, raw and staggering. Grief that someone else had carried Aaron's final breaths. Grief that the woman he had torn down was the one who had borne his cousin's weight. He pressed both hands to the wall behind the staging platform, shoulders locked, eyes shut. Eden's silence rang louder in his chest than any reprimand ever. General Keene's voice returned, quieter now. She didn't ask to be honored. She never will, but that doesn't change what she is, for the record, Chief. He turned back to her, voice low, reverent. Welcome home. Eden didn't answer. Didn't need to. Her silence was her salute. The general turned away. The SUV door closed. The formation dispersed, but the ground itself felt different, for the first time in years, Eden Wolf had been seen, and nothing about Fort Tannisville would ever return to what it was. What do you do when the ghost you mocked turns out to be the one who carried your family's last breath? Sergeant Travis Rock couldn't move for an hour after the ceremony ended. Soldiers had dispersed. The general was gone. Eden Wolf had packed her tools in silence and slipped away. But Rock stayed frozen behind the staging platform, staring at the dust shifting across the parade ground. Aaron Cross, the name burned in his mind like shrapnel, his cousin, his brother and everything, but blood. The boy who had taught him to climb out of windows when their father's fists felt too heavy. The one who made him swear he'd serve, not for medals, not for rank, but to do it right. And now he knew who had been with Aaron at the end, Eden Wolf, the woman he had ridiculed, dismissed, tried to break. Grief clawed at his chest, not the clean kind that comes with funerals and folded flags. This was the dirty grief, the kind laced with shame, the kind that whispers, you were wrong, you wasted time, you dishonored the very thing you were supposed to protect. He pressed his palms into the wall, jaw locked, trying to breathe through it, but the weight wouldn't lift. Footsteps approached, slow, steady. Rock didn't turn. He knew before the voice came. You feel it yet? Leo Delgado, the quiet one, the man who had shown his own ink, standing shoulder to shoulder with Eden without asking permission. Rock swallowed hard. Feel what? Leo stopped beside him, arms crossed, eyes on the gravel. The truth, when it lands. Rock's throat tightened. He tried to speak but couldn't. Finally, he managed. I spent weeks treating her like some fraud, like a joke. His voice cracked on the last word. Leo nodded slowly. And she let you because that's what ghosts do. The silence stretched, long, heavy. Rock felt it pressing in from all sides. Finally, he whispered, "She never once said his name. Not to me. Not to anyone." Leo's tone softened. She didn't have to. Some names don't need to be spoken. They're carried. The words broke something loose in Rock's chest. He looked down at his boots, jaw trembling. For years he had carried anger, resentment. They had given his family nothing when Aaron died. No details, no closure. Just a folded flag and a letter with no answers. Rock had built his own story in the silence. That someone had failed him. That someone had let Aaron die. And all the while, the truth had been walking in front of him, silent, carrying the weight without complaint. That evening, long after the base had gone quiet, Rock found her. She was alone behind the armory, sitting on a wooden crate, sleeves rolled up, sniper bolt cradled in her hands, wiping it clean in the fading light. No fanfare, no witnesses, just her and the ritual of silence. He stood there for a moment, unsure if he had the right to speak. The wind brushed dust across the concrete between them. His throat felt raw. His hands shook. Finally, the words stumbled out. "I didn't know." Eden didn't look up. "I didn't know it was you." He said again, voice breaking, "I didn't know you were with him, that you were the one who—" He stopped. He couldn't finish the sentence. The words lodged in his chest like glass. Her hands never stopped moving. The cloth ran smooth across the steel. Her silence was heavy, but not cruel. "I looked for answers for years," Rock whispered. "We buried Aaron with no truth, no closure, and I thought maybe someone screwed up. Maybe someone let him die. That got her attention. Eden looked up at him then, her eyes calm, unreadable, but sharp enough to cut straight through his chest. Rock swallowed hard. The truth pressed against his teeth until it finally broke free. "Then I found out he died saving you." The evening air seemed to still. Eden stood slowly, the light catching the tattoo on her arm. The 3 names etched dark against her skin. They burned in the glow of sunset, like scripture carved in fire. "He didn't save me," she said quietly. "He made sure the mission ended the way it had to." Rock shook his head, voice rough. "He would have followed you into hell. I know him." Her silence was the answer. He felt it more than heard it. For a moment, they just stood there, 2 shadows caught in the fading light, grief binding them tighter than blood ever could. Finally, Rock forced the words out. "I don't deserve to ask this, but if you're going to train anyone here, I want in." Eden studied him, not as the sergeant who had mocked her, not as the man who had tried to strip her dignity. She studied him the way she once studied rifles, weighing fractures, searching for truth. "You'll have to start over," she said. Rock nodded quickly. No ego, no shortcuts. She didn't smile, didn't soften. She simply held out the sniper bolt, still unfinished, as if it were a test. "You'll help build them," she said. "Before you try to lead them." He took it gently, almost reverently, like it was more than steel in his hands. And when she turned back to her kit, Rock stood there clutching it, knowing he had been handed more than a weapon part. He had been handed a chance, not at forgiveness, not yet, but at something close, the beginning of redemption. That night, Rock lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling, his chest still heavy, but different now. Not grief without direction, not anger without target, something steadier, harder. He didn't know what Eden would demand of him, but he knew one thing. For the first time in years, he wanted to earn it. And that was how the change began. Quietly, without ceremony, not in the briefing rooms or on the drill fields, but in the silence of an armory bench at dawn. Eden Wolf had never asked for followers. She had never asked for students. But ghosts don't choose who sees them, and sometimes the ones who once mocked the loudest become the first to kneel at the weight of silence. What happens when soldiers start showing up to train in silence? At first, It was only 3 of them. Eden at the bench before sunrise, the same as always. Rock arriving a few minutes later, sniper bolt in his hand, jaw set in the kind of grim determination that comes when pride has been stripped away. And Leo Delgado, leaning against the far wall, sleeves rolled, watching them with quiet approval. The rest of the base still slept. Reveille hadn't sounded yet. No formations, no drills, no shouting. Just the echo of steel and the scrape of tools across the armory tables. Eden didn't explain. She never said, "This is training." She never laid out rules or schedules. She simply worked, and if Rock wanted to stand beside her, he had to keep up. The first mornings were brutal. She gave him nothing. No encouragement, no praise. She'd correct him once, briefly, then move on. When his assembly jammed, she waited in silence until he figured it out. When his hands shook from fatigue, she ignored him. When his temper flared, she didn't flinch. Rock hated it, and yet he needed it, because every correction stuck deeper than any screaming sergeant ever had. The silence forced him to listen, not just with his ears, but with his hands, with his patience, and for the first time in his career, he realized discipline wasn't about barking orders, it was about restraint. By the second week, others began to notice. A couple of younger SEAL candidates lingered near the doorway. Curious, they didn't speak, just watched. The next morning, they came earlier, edging closer. By the third morning, they were inside, quietly picking up rifles and mimicking Rock's movements. Eden never acknowledged them. She simply set out more rifles, more tools, more pieces stripped down and waiting. She taught by absence. If you failed to show, the lesson went on without you. If you didn't listen, the silence left you behind. And still they came. They started calling it Ghost Hour. At first as a joke, whispered between bunks, but soon the name stuck. Ghost Hour wasn't in the manuals. It wasn't sanctioned. It wasn't commanded. It was something else. Something heavier. No shouting, no rank, no shortcuts. Just steel, just breath, just silence. Rock changed the fastest. The men who had once laughed with him now watched him move differently. He no longer barked sarcasm in the chow hall. He no longer strutted across the bay. Instead, he absorbed everything. Eden didn't say, and slowly it became his own rhythm. One morning, Eden handed him her own rifle. Without a word, he froze, stunned by the weight of the gesture. It wasn't just a weapon. It was trust. She never said it aloud. She never would. But Rock understood. By the second month, Eden let him lead warm-ups. Leo stepped in to correct grips, align sights. The younger recruits followed. Eyes sharp, breaths measured. It wasn't discipline born of fear. It was discipline born of respect. And respect earned in silence runs deeper than anything rank can demand. The base commander noticed the change. At first, he thought it was coincidence. A subtle improvement in weapon maintenance reports. Fewer malfunctions during live fire. Then he heard whispers. Ghost Hour. The word spread like current through the wires of the base. Still, no one stopped it. How could they? It wasn't official. It wasn't even visible. It was just a handful of soldiers gathering at 0430 in a quiet armory, learning how to move slower, steadier, sharper. And always at the center of it, Eden Wolf, still silent, still unacknowledged, still carrying the names inked into her arm like a scripture she refused to preach. Rock didn't know how long it would last. He didn't ask. He only knew one thing. For the first time in his life, he was learning what Aaron had meant when he said, "Do it right."